Recently, I experienced a shocking incident that left me profoundly unsettled. In an unexpected and unsettling turn of events, my mother-in-law seized my passport and intentionally burned it. The flames quickly consumed the document, reducing it to nothing but ashes in a matter of moments. This abrupt act dashed my plans for a vacation to Street Bees Island, leaving me in a state of disbelief. When I confronted her for an explanation, she simply smirked, coldly declaring that since I was a stranger in her eyes, I wouldn't be traveling anywhere but staying home beside her. My husband, Peter, merely offered a grin, complicit in their deceit. Their cruel maneuver was shocking, though not entirely surprising. However, the level of their sneakiness was beyond anything I had anticipated. They seemed to revel in their scheme, sharing laughs over what they considered a triumph. Frustrated and desperate to assert my identity, I reminded them who I was. My name is Kayla. I'm 30 years old and I'm a linguist. I study and teach languages at the university, a role that often requires me to travel abroad for extended periods as I engage with different cultures and share my knowledge. My job demands frequent travel, often taking me away from home for months at a time. Before this career, I never imagined marriage would be in my future. But everything changed when I returned to my home country at 25 and met Peter, who would later become my husband. Despite the challenges posed by my career, which keeps me overseas for about half the year, Peter and I maintained our relationship through constant communication via phone calls and emails. We married when I was 27, and he has been incredibly supportive, even with the long separations that define our life together. As I made my way home from the airport after a 6-month absence, I felt excitement bubbling within me rather than fatigue. I was eager to reunite with Peter, hoping for a joyful reunion and perhaps a resolution to the turmoil his family had caused. Upon arriving home, I discovered that Peter hadn't yet returned, so I started tidying up. Although I always remind him to keep our place neat, I usually find it somewhat disordered. Normally, this would bother me, but today I decided to overlook it because I was simply too thrilled to see him again. As I busied myself in the kitchen, I heard the front door open. It was Peter. Overjoyed, I rushed to greet him. "Welcome home, Peter. It's so good to see you." But his response was lukewarm. "Oh, hi, Kayla. You're back," he said, almost dismissively. After 6 months apart, I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Peter, aren't you going to say you miss me?" I asked, trying to mask my hurt. He shrugged. "We've been doing this for a while, so I guess I'm used to it. I'm just really tired." "Is dinner ready?" he asked, shifting the conversation. "Yes, it's ready. Let's eat." Dinner should have felt special after so many months apart, but today it was tinged with sadness. His attention seemed divided as he constantly glanced at his phone while we ate. I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. "Hey, Peter, why do you keep staring at your phone?" I asked, trying to mask my irritation. He brushed me off, claiming there's nothing wrong. "But you've been gone, and we've stayed connected through calls and emails, right? There's nothing new to discuss." His dismissive attitude stung. "That may be true, Peter, but it's been a long time since we've been together. Shouldn't that count for something?" My tone sharpened with my growing frustration, and I could see it upset him. He stood up abruptly, placing his phone on the table, and glared at me. "You just came off a plane, but I'm exhausted from work," he snapped, and his words cut deep. "I'm tired too. I came straight here after work." "Don't talk to me like that," I retorted, my voice rising. "I didn't ask you to rush home. You chose to come back immediately," he replied coldly. His words felt like a slap in the face, but I needed to express how I felt. "You don't have to say it like that. Despite everything, I missed you." For a moment, we both paused, the weight of my words hanging heavily between us. After months apart, I had returned only to find the atmosphere chillingly tense. Peter's reception was colder than I had expected. As we sat down for dinner, he blurted out, "I didn't ask you to rush home. If you're going to act like this, maybe you shouldn't have come back at all. You're being annoying, Kayla." Frustrated, he slammed his hand on the table and stormed out of the room, leaving his dinner untouched. Alone and confused, I wondered why he was acting so cold. I had eagerly anticipated our reunion, but it felt like I was the only one excited. What was the point of coming home early if it only ended in disappointment? Tears spilled onto the table as I sat there, the joy of our reunion overshadowed by a sinking feeling of dread. The next morning, the tension still lingered. When I greeted him with a good morning, he shot me a frosty look and said bitterly, "I envy you. You get to relax at home all the time while I'm stuck working." That's not true, I replied, trying to correct him. I have a lot of work too, summarizing our activities, preparing for the next training session. It's more work than you think. He dismissed my efforts with a wave. Sure, but you can do it from home. I wish I had a job where I could take half the year off. Enjoy your time at home, princess. Stunned by his sarcastic tone, I watched as he left the house without another word. We had argued before, but he had never been this cutting. His sarcasm left me puzzled and worried about the growing rift between us, and I found myself pondering what might help mend our relationship. I busied myself with household chores, vacuuming and changing the linens when my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. A sense of unease washed over me as I answered, "Hello, Kayla here." "Hi, Kayla. It's been a while. I heard you're back home and had a rough day yesterday," she said, her tone casual. "Yes, that's right," I replied, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "And I also heard you upset Peter," she added, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "He was quite angry." Her words added to my confusion and worry, leaving me questioning how I could bridge the growing gap between Peter and me since my return. Then, during the call, my mother-in-law's suggestion caught me off guard. "Now that you're back, how about we plan a family trip?" she proposed. Before I could process the idea, she continued, "I was talking with my husband about going to Street Barks Island, and Peter mentioned he wanted to join us. You used to travel abroad, right? Could you help us with hotel reservations and other arrangements?" Her request felt loaded. It was clear from her tone that she didn't relish the thought of traveling with me but saw an opportunity to leverage my travel experience. My relationship with her had always been strained. She had never hidden her disdain for me, especially since our first meeting at the wedding reception, where her sarcastic attitude had made a lasting impression. Even after 3 years of marriage, her views hadn't softened. When I was working abroad, she often sent stinging messages questioning my commitment as a wife. "How can you be a wife and stay away from home for months? If you don't take care of the house, I'd rather my son marry someone else. It was a mistake to let him marry you." Those memories made me apprehensive about her proposal. It felt as if I were being used merely to facilitate their travel plans, a task that seemed far more appealing to her than enduring her usual critiques. I was frustrated with myself for my inability to decline, even though I knew I was being manipulated. A few hours later, Peter returned from work in a noticeably better mood than before. He dropped his briefcase on the sofa, flashed a wide smile, and said, "Mom called, didn't she? We can go on a trip to Street Barts." "Yeah, I heard," I replied cautiously. "But you're not thinking of turning it down, are you?" "Mom wants you to come with us," he pressed, his enthusiasm making it even harder for me to express my reservations. I understood his desire for me to be involved, but the dynamics made me uneasy. How could I navigate this situation without escalating tensions or feeling even more used? As the conversation about the family trip continued, I tentatively suggested, "Why don't you just go with your mom and dad as you originally planned?" The moment those words left my lips, Peter's demeanor shifted dramatically. He clicked his tongue, and his voice turned more threatening. "You need to understand your role here. The only time you're useful to us is when we're traveling." His words stung. "You don't have to talk to me like that," I protested. "It's true, isn't it?" he shot back, undeterred. "Anyway, you'll handle all the flight and hotel bookings, and everything should be in my name." "But Peter, you're going to pay for the whole trip," I clarified, trying to understand our financial arrangement. "What are you talking about? We'll split the cost 50-50. It's a small price to pay to show respect to our parents," he argued, implying that my objection was disrespectful. "And what does that mean? If you've got time to lounge around at home, make the reservations now," he demanded. "This isn't right. I don't want to," I mumbled, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you mumbling about?" he scoffed, grabbing a beer from the fridge and downing it in one gulp. Despite my inner turmoil and the unfairness of the situation, I felt cornered, embarrassed, and without a real choice. Reluctantly, I proceeded to make all the arrangements for the flights and accommodations for the trip to Street Barts, just as Peter and his mother had insisted. I was set to pick them up at my in-laws' house and head straight to the airport, but a few days before our departure, I found myself restless and unable to sleep. Late at night, I noticed Peter wasn't beside me. I walked to the living room and overheard him on the phone. "It's okay, Mom. I'll be there first thing in the morning as planned. Please handle the passport issue. Anyway, seriously, I'm looking forward to it. I'll make sure to introduce her to you," he said into the receiver. Hearing this stirred a mix of emotions within me. What was supposed to be a family trip was morphing into a series of commands and manipulations, and now there were secrets involved too. I stood there, unsure of how to confront this new revelation. When I returned home, Peter's conversation still echoed in my mind. He had mentioned a passport and an introduction, and since he was talking to his mother, I was certain she was on the other end. It felt like there were hidden plans that I wasn't privy to, leaving me uneasy about the upcoming trip. Clearly, something was being orchestrated behind my back, but I couldn't grasp the full extent of it. Determined to remain vigilant, I cautiously prepared for our departure. The day of our trip to Street Barts finally arrived. I methodically packed both my carry-on and handbag, including items for my husband, ensuring we were ready for the journey. With everything set, Peter and I drove to my in-laws' house. As we approached, I braced myself, unsure of what awaited us, but ready to face whatever might come. Upon our arrival, it was only my mother-in-law who greeted us. "Oh, hi Kayla. It's been a while. Good to see you. We're almost ready. I just need to grab a few things for the trip, so it might be a little while," she said, her tone casual yet laced with urgency, raising my suspicions even further. "Okay, take your time," I replied, trying to mask my growing unease. I nodded in response, but then she added, "Oh, and Kayla, could you bring the carry-on case from the other room? It's heavy, so please get Peter to help you." "Sure, I'll do that," I agreed, keenly observing the exchange of knowing glances between my husband and mother-in-law. I kept my passport securely in my pocket, an instinctual move born from the mistrust that had been building. Following my husband's directions, I returned to the living room with the carry-on, only to find my mother-in-law waiting for me with a mischievous grin. To my horror, she was holding my passport in her hands. "Now you can't go on the trip to Street Barts," she declared, a smirk spreading across her face. "What do you mean?" I asked, disbelief washing over me. The weight of her words began to sink in. "I'm going to burn this passport right now," she threatened. "What did you just say?" I responded, my heart racing. "I was just using you to handle the trip arrangements," she admitted callously. "You're a stranger here, so you'll be staying behind. Too bad." Her words struck me like a cold slap. The situation was far worse than I had imagined, and the betrayal cut deep. I realized I was not just an outsider in their plans, but merely a pawn in whatever game they were playing. The revelation left me reeling, unsure of how to respond to such blatant manipulation and deceit. In a sudden and shocking move, my mother-in-law stormed into the kitchen, lit a lighter, and set my passport ablaze in the sink. The document quickly caught fire, turning to black ashes before our eyes. "We did it," she triumphantly declared. My husband joined in, cheering, "Yeah, Mom, we made it." "No," I interjected, my voice rising. "It's just the three of us on this trip, right? We'll get to meet Peter's new girlfriend when we get back." "I've already set that up," my mother-in-law replied nonchalantly. "We don't need this useless woman anymore." My father-in-law chimed in coldly, pulling out his cell phone to show me pictures of himself with another woman, a satisfied grin on his face. "I'm not divorcing you for the sake of my reputation, but you'll be staying here while we go on our trip. When we get back, I'll move in with her, and you can leave." My mother-in-law laughed mockingly at his words, and their expressions were filled with malice. At that moment, I realized the depth of their betrayal. I realized I no longer belonged in a family like this. Forcing a smile, I asked, "By the way, whose passport is that?" "What are you talking about? It's yours, of course," she replied confidently. "I took it out of your handbag." "My passport is right here," I said, holding up my actual passport from my pocket. "What? No, it can't be," she stammered, her confidence wavering. I showed her my passport, still intact. "Yes, it's my passport. See for yourself." Panic washed over her as the realization dawned. Her face turned pale. "That's not possible," she muttered, her voice trembling. It seemed my mother-in-law had mistakenly believed she had taken my passport from my handbag without checking thoroughly before burning it. "Whose passport did I burn then?" she asked, her voice quivering with fear and confusion. "I guess it was your son's passport that was in there," I suggested. "You burned my son's passport," she gasped, horrified. My mother-in-law turned white as the weight of her mistake hit her. The already strained family dynamics were now irrevocably shaken by her rash actions and the underlying schemes that had come to light. As the chaos unfolded, my husband's fury erupted. "What have you done? I told you to be careful. I only found one passport in her handbag. Who would have thought it belonged to me?" "I don't care. You didn't check properly. And now look what's happened, he shouted. You're saying it's my fault. If you had checked from the start, I wouldn't have made this mistake, she retorted, her voice rising in defense. Their argument escalated quickly, each blaming the other amidst the turmoil. My husband turned to me, exasperated. Hey, Kayla, do something. But I refused to be dragged further into their mess. Seriously, who do you think you are, telling me what to do? You cheated on me behind my back. How dare you both? You and your mother are despicable. Hey, who do you think you're talking to? My husband snapped. I'm talking to you and your awful mother. Don't think I'm just going to let this slide. You're going to pay me back for the affair and all the nasty things your mother has said to me, I declared, my resolve hardening. Just then, my father-in-law appeared, drawn by the noise. What's going on here? He demanded. After I explained everything, he was livid. The planned trip was immediately canceled, and the fallout was severe. My mother-in-law faced a divorce while my husband was disowned by his father and banned from returning home. I consulted a lawyer and proceeded with the divorce, demanding alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law. They were required to pay in one lump sum and cover the costs of the canceled trip to Street Nevis Island. Financially unprepared, they had to borrow money to meet these demands. In the end, my ex-husband, now living with his mother, found himself in a tough financial situation. He was also abandoned by the woman he had an affair with. Meanwhile, I used the alimony money to move into a condo and start anew, embracing a life of independence free from deceit and mistreatment. I faced many challenges, but I emerged stronger. Now, I'm loving life, planning to continue my travels, learning about different cultures, and sharing my experiences with the world.